Hey everybody, Dr. Snellgrove here with a quick video on chapter 23 of your book. Chapter 23 starts on page 447, but doesn't really get rolling until page 448. And I might be overselling it a little bit, but for as relatively short as this chapter is, it's actually one of the most important, if not the most important sections in the book, at least to my perspective. Because I've been sharing with some students in my face-to-face classes this week that when people find out that I'm an English professor, for some reason, the first question that they all want to ask is, hey, what are the most common errors that you encounter? And before I even have the words, or they even have the words out of their mouth, I say, oh, it's commas. It's always commas, comma errors, number one with the bullet. And so this is a chapter that's all about using commas, and we're going to get more into comma stuff in the remainder, I think, of the semester, but this is very important for you to know. All right, so on page 448, they start out with arguably one of the simpler things, commas setting off introductory words, phrases, and clauses. So introductory just means like, hey, what is appearing in front of the rest of your sentence? And you've heard me say it before, you'll hear me say it again, that generally speaking, you put commas where you would put pauses in speech. And so you can see these are a matter of putting commas where you would normally put a pause anyway. Like if you look on page 448, suddenly, comma, the elevator jerked to a stop. In the distance, comma, a coyote howled. Since the class did not meet yesterday, comma, Hannah spent the day in the library. So the book is giving you, and I'm by extension giving you the rule about, like, yes, you put commas to set off those introductory words, phrases, and clauses, but it's also one of those things that, like, if you imagine saying these sentences out loud without putting a comma in there, suddenly the elevator jerked to a stop. Doesn't it sound like you're saying it a little too quickly? It does, because you are. In the distance, a coyote howled. Well, slow down there, man. In the distance, a coyote howled. Suddenly, the elevator jerked to a stop. Just like we put a pause in our speech, we put a comma there when expressing this in writing. All right, and you can see a little bit of the practice section on 448. Like if we look at number 1 there, using commas with introductory elements, we do carefully, comma, Sachiko moved her right hand up to grasp an edge on the rock climbing wall. Number 2, gripping her violin case firmly, comma, Martine headed for the audition. Number 3, when the fireworks began, comma, Erica covered her ears. Spoilers, Erica's a dog. Not really. But in all those cases, like I said, I'm hoping that you can hear that. Like these are sentences where you can say them out loud, realize where you would be putting a pause, and that's exactly where you have to put a comma. Now, on the bottom half of 448, we have a thing for commas to join items in a series. So this is probably pretty familiar to you, even if you don't necessarily remember any fancy grammatical rules attached to it. So this is like, hey, I've got a list of at least 3 things. What do I do? Well, I have to have a comma after the first 2. And so they have examples of this at the very bottom on 448. Iguanas, comma, chameleons, comma, and salamanders were Ted's passion when he was 7. Motorcycles, comma, off-road vehicles, comma, and cars are his passion at 17. All right, so in each case, we are giving a list of 3 things. So the sequence is always comma after the first one, comma after the second one, then the word and introducing the last one, and no comma after the last one. And I know I'm a broken record on this front, but this is another one where, like, understanding that commas normally go where you put pauses in speech and vice versa, you could probably figure some of this out. Like iguanas, chameleons, if you say it too fast, it sounds weird, right? Iguanas, chameleons, and salamanders. No, iguanas, chameleons, and salamanders were Ted's passion when he was 7. What I was going to say there is we don't put a comma after the last item in the series, not just because of the grammatical rule, but wouldn't that sound weird? Iguanas, chameleons, and salamanders were Ted's passion when he was 7. It sounds weird if we try to put a pause before that last one. So comma after the first one, comma after the second one, comma after others before you get to the last one, and then no comma with the last one. All right. And this may be obvious, maybe not, but they put it towards the top of 449. They have the thing there, hey, there's only 2 items in the series, no comma is used. because you usually, if you're joining items in a series and there's only two of them, you're just going to use the word and. Stacy said her two worst vices were soap operas and talk shows. So soap operas and talk shows, there's only two things: no comma is needed, no pause is needed. Here's a cheerful one. Jason takes care of his parents because they are old and because they once took care of him. So there's two reasons there: because they're old, because they took care of him. It's only two reasons, so there are no commas in there. All right. And you can see a little of this, the practice exercise kind of in the middle of the page there, where it's like, Kaylin asked for hot fudge, comma, whipped cream, comma, sprinkles, comma, and a cherry on her ice cream sundae. So in this case, we had 4 items instead of 3, but it follows that rule of 3 or more, where we have a comma after all of them except that last one. So hot fudge, comma, whipped cream, comma, sprinkles, comma. Then we have the word and a cherry on her ice cream sundae. Let's see. We'll look at maybe the last one there, number 5. Students screamed as the lights flickered, the alarm sounded, and the elevator jerked to a halt. So it's lights flickered, comma, the alarm sounded, comma, and the elevator jerked to a halt. So all this is pretty straightforward. Now we get to the part that's not always as straightforward. This is the bottom of 449 going to the top of 450, and maybe the most important part of this particular chapter, talking about joining independent clauses by using commas. So as you hopefully remember, independent clauses are when you have a subject, verb, and complete thought, right? And so Jesus wept, shortest independent clause in the Bible. And so what this is saying is, what if I want to join 2 independent clauses together? I want to take these 2 things that could have been sentences on their own and turn them into one larger sentence. What do you do? Okay, well, all you have to do at that point is put a comma at the end of the first independent clause, then give us the proper coordinating conjunction, and then you give us the second independent clause. So coordinating conjunctions, they have this handy little acronym mnemonic device thing to remember. This at the bottom of 449, fanboys. So there are only 7 coordinating conjunctions: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Only 7 coordinating conjunctions here. And so the rule of thumb is we do the one independent clause, then we have a comma, then we have the proper coordinating conjunction, and then the second independent clause. All right. And so they have some examples here at the bottom of 449. Harrison thought that researching would be the easy part of his project, comma, but it turned out to be the hardest. So he thought researching would be the easy part of his project. That's one independent clause. It turned out to be the hardest is a second independent clause. And then we join them with a comma and the word but. So but is one of our 7 coordinating conjunctions. And this may be obvious as the words leave my mouth, but you want to choose the logical coordinating conjunction. Because imagine if you were like, Harrison thought that researching would be the easy part of his project, or it turned out to be the hardest. Or is one of the coordinating conjunctions, but it does not properly join those 2 ideas. In this case, we have to use the word but, where they also could have used yet, because we're introducing surprising info. Like, he thought it'd be easy. It turned out to be the hardest part of the project. I feel this one. I feel exhausted already, comma, and tomorrow is just Tuesday. So I feel exhausted already, subject, verb, complete thought. Tomorrow is just Tuesday, subject, verb, complete thought. In between these 2 independent clauses, we have a comma and a coordinated conjunction, the word and. The very bottom one on 449, Karen's sinus medication makes her sleepy, comma, so she avoids taking it during the day. All right, we have to use the word so there because among the coordinating conjunctions, so is the one that implies a cause and effect. It's like, because she did this, she's also doing this. Karen's sinus medication makes her sleepy, so she avoids taking it during the day. Cause and effect, one thing leads to the other, and the word so helps to explain that. All right, and then they have a thing at the top of 450 says, do not use a comma if the fanboys connect verb to verb rather than clause to clause. In other words, do not use a comma unless there's a complete sentence on both sides of the conjunction. So they explain that kind of weirdly, but if you look at 450, Ernestine lay in a hammock and read a book. And they're saying, hey, you wouldn't use a comma there, but the reason you wouldn't use a comma is Ernestine lay in a hammock is a subject verb complete thought. Read a book is not. We don't have a subject there. So those are not two independent clauses joined together. Similarly, we have Nick looked for his glasses but couldn't find them. Okay, Nick looked for his glasses is an independent clause, but couldn't find them is not. Once again, we don't have a subject there. So another way of saying this is if you have a dependent clause at the end of your independent clause, no comma is needed. All right. So I'm going to move past these examples. Hopefully you guys are okay with that. They have a thing on the bottom half of 450, commas around interrupters. And this is kind of a fun thing. Like sometimes you have what is functionally extra information, additional information in a sentence. And so it's like, we call it extra information because it might be useful to know, good to know, but we don't need it as part of our subject verb complete thought thing. So here's an example right from the bottom of 450. The dog, comma, his tail wagging, comma, bounded toward his owner. So his tail wagging is what they call in the book an interrupter. You know, look how we can take this out and we still have a complete sentence. The dog bounded toward his owner. Subject verb complete thought. The fact that, you know, the dog, comma, his tail wagging, comma, it's extra info. It's good to know, but we don't need it to have an independent clause. And so the book is pointing out that you can put commas around these interrupters. And what the book doesn't tell you is that you can do the same thing with either parentheses or hyphens. So this could have been the dog, parentheses, his tail wagging, close parentheses, bounded toward his owner. They have another one here. The student, comma, disappointed by her grades, comma, withdrew from the course at midterm. All right, so that's another one where we could have just said the student withdrew from the course at midterm. So that extra info, the interrupter, disappointed by her grades, we can put that in commas, we can put it in parentheses, we can put it in hyphens. So we'll look at maybe one or two of these examples here, commas around interrupters. Number one, at the bottom of 450. The interruption, comma, brief as it was, comma, distracted Heather and made it hard for her to focus on her work again. So the brief as it was, once again, you could just airlift that out. You've still got a subject verb complete thought. You've still got a complete sentence. So we help the reader out by putting that interrupter in between commas, or as I keep saying, you could use parentheses, you could use hyphens. We'll look at the number two. It's the very top of 451. The jogging path, comma, a popular spot for runners and walkers alike, comma, stretches through the woods and along the lake. So once again, you can take the interrupter out. The jogging path stretches through the woods and along the lake. So the extra info that's in there, that is extra info that we need to contain inside commas, inside parentheses, or inside hyphens. On the middle of 451, they have something that you guys probably already know, using commas with direct quotations. And so this just shows you three different variations of integrating quotes and how you would use commas. So you can give the quote, this is number one on there, you can give the quote first and then put the comma at the end of the quote. So I think I can find the information I need on the internet, comma, JVO said. It's like, all right, or you can do, this is very common in books, you can do so-and-so said, comma, and then a quote. So number two, Sophie said, comma, if I had the time, I would audit a world history class, right? And then the last one, if it had not been for Hal, comma, said the supervisor, comma, I don't know what we would have done. So number three is basically like a synthesis of number one and number two there. So these are all ways that you would set off quotations, and this doesn't necessarily matter as much right now, but this is going to instantly become more important in the like research-based essays that you might work on, where you have to set up quotes and integrate those quotes into your own writing. All right, the last section in this shortish chapter, page 452, is another one that you might already be pretty familiar with, commas in names and dates. So it's saying that, like, if you have a name and then you have a title or some kind of family designation, you have to put a comma in between them. So they have some examples here. The woman's name tag read Judy Smith, comma, LPN. All right, so LPN is her title. So Judy Smith, comma, LPN. They have another one here. Raymond Johnson, comma, CPA, comma, rented an office on 2nd Street. So that's pretty basic stuff, right? Like I don't really wear it much these days, but I have a name tag somewhere. It's like, Chris Snellgrove, comma, PhD, philosophical doctorate. That's why I'm Dr. Snellgrove. So that's just a basic rule. Now, here's one that you probably use a lot more commonly than you use the names. I'm sorry, the names and titles one, dates. So when you write month, day, and year, we have to have a comma between the day and the year. So the Declaration of Independence was signed on July 4, comma, 1776. So they gave month, day, year. We had to have a comma after the day. But that's if we don't give a day, we don't need a comma. So they have another example of that right under it. The Declaration of Independence was signed in July 1776. So if you didn't give us a specific date, no commas needed. If you gave us a specific date, we need a comma after the day. And that's about it on this one. You guys know the drill by now. If you have questions about any of this, any and all of this, feel free to text me at 863-835-2399, or feel free to give me an email. I'm happy to help you out. Until next time, bye.